She stood up from the table in the middle of the conversation. There was no fight, no raised voice. Michael was still speaking, trying to share a childhood memory, when Emily placed her napkin over the plate and simply said, "I'm sorry." She left the restaurant with calm steps, but a storm inside her chest. The night air felt heavier than before. The street went on as usual, cars, headlights, muffled city noises. But inside, something had collapsed. In the Uber, she kept her eyes fixed on the window, as if the city could explain why, once again, she was walking away from something that had barely begun. Michael was kind, attentive, present. And even so, she felt fear the moment he said, "I think I'm falling in love with you." That was when Emily realized just how afraid she was of staying. What if it's not the other who leaves? What if you're the one who never knew how to stay? This story begins with a coffee that lasted 3 hours. Emily arrived late, as usual. Hair half loose, restless eyes, and a rush that didn't come from traffic, but from within. Michael was already there, waiting with a small smile and 2 warm coffees on the table. He didn't complain. He wasn't performing. He simply said, "I like it when you come, even if you're late." She laughed, a little awkward, and sat down. The conversation started shy, but soon found its rhythm. They talked about books, places they'd never been, and the small things that make days feel a little softer. Michael listened with rare attentiveness. He didn't interrupt, didn't turn the spotlight on himself. When Emily shared something from her past, he didn't try to fix it. He just listened. Sometimes he'd simply say, "I imagine that must have hurt." He liked small surprises. A folded note in her coat pocket. A tea prepared the way she mentioned once in passing. A gentle touch on her back when he sensed she was withdrawing. Never intrusive, never demanding. And just like that, without promises, Emily began to enjoy being there. With him. With herself. In the following weeks, their meetings became routine. Michael remembered details. He texted in the middle of the day to ask if she'd eaten. Brought old movies for them to watch. Cooked simple meals that made the house smell like Sunday. He knew how to be silent without being absent. How to stay close without suffocating. His calm wasn't apathy. It was presence. She had never experienced that. That steady kindness. That gentle presence. And maybe that's why she started wondering if it was real. Or if, like everything that feels too good, it would end. It happened slowly. Almost imperceptibly. First, Emily took longer to respond to messages. She said she was busy, had a hectic day. But truthfully, she was deliberately setting the phone aside, as if creating distance helped her breathe. She began replying more formally, as if trying to draw an invisible line between us and me. Then came a made-up headache to skip the movie. She was fine. She just couldn't explain why she didn't want to be with him that day. When he responded with understanding, his silence unsettled her. She wished he would insist. And at the same time, wished he would give up. The following week, she canceled dinner because she needed time alone. And again, she locked herself in the room, turned on the TV, and kept switching channels, watching nothing. She felt a restlessness that wouldn't go away, a mix of guilt and relief. Michael didn't push. He sent kind messages asking if she needed anything. Emily replied with an emoji or a short phrase, then quickly put her phone away. She started avoiding his apartment, saying she was tired. But inside, what she really felt was fear. Fear of disappointing him. Fear of not knowing how to return what he gave so naturally. Fear of not being enough for something so simple and sincere. The discomfort was quiet, but growing. When he said he missed her, she smiled, but felt a knot inside. When he complimented her, she said thank you, but wanted to cry. During their time together, her laughter came late. Her gaze would drift before their eyes could meet. It was as if something too good was trying to enter, and her body didn't know how to let it. She began sleeping poorly, dreaming of absurd scenarios where Michael left her, even though she was the one pulling away. During the day, she'd recall the dreams with a racing heart, as if losing something she never truly had. And it was in that space, between wanting and running, that Emily started to realize it wasn't Michael. It was her. And that terrified her even more, because for the first time, she had no one to blame but herself. Michael wanted them to spend a weekend together, away from the city, away from excuses and distractions. He mentioned the idea gently, like offering something precious. A small cabin in the woods, fireplace lit, freshly ground coffee, an easy trail that reminded her of childhood walks, the ones she mentioned once over dinner, and he remembered. Emily truly smiled. She was excited, made plans, said yes, that it would be good for both of them to breathe a different kind of air. She even started packing books and cozy clothes. Warm socks, an old coat she loved, and that notebook where she wrote fragments of her days. But on the morning of the trip, her body felt heavy. Her mind was foggy. She looked at the packed suitcase at the foot of the bed and felt a strange tightening, like stepping through that door meant surrendering to something she still couldn't name. In that moment, heart racing and fingers trembling, she picked up her phone. "I'm sorry. I can't go." No explanation. No plausible reason. Just that. Michael took a while to reply, then wrote, "That's okay. Take care of yourself." She read the message and felt her chest cave in. She walked over to the suitcase, unpacked the clothes one by one, folded them slowly, as if putting her silence back in place. Then she sat on the floor of the bedroom, the phone beside her, mute, the house quiet, and a question lingering in her throat. Why was she doing this? She thought of him, of his care, his gentleness, the way he never made her feel less. And still, something in her withdrew every time love tried to come closer. It wasn't fear of the other. It was fear of being seen, of being loved without hiding. That weekend, Emily didn't travel, but it was as if she had gone somewhere far deeper, the place where all her escapes lived. In the following days, Michael tried to talk to her. He sent messages asking if she was okay, if she needed anything, if they could talk. Emily answered with short phrases, said she was sick. And she was, but not with fever or a sore throat. It was another kind of illness, that weariness that comes from within. That Wednesday he showed up at her door. He said he didn't want to push, just needed to understand, to look in her eyes and see if there was still room for him there. Emily wasn't expecting him. She opened the door with pale cheeks and hunched shoulders. Michael wore a dark coat, holding a paper bag with soup and a book. He said, "I'm not here to pressure you. I just want to know if you're okay." She hesitated, thought about inviting him in, but couldn't. She only said, "Michael, I can't. Please go." He looked at her for a few seconds, then lowered his eyes, nodded silently, and left the paper bag at her doorstep. He walked slowly down the hallway, without looking back. When the door closed, Emily slid down to the floor, her back against the wood, hands gripping her knees, her breathing shallow, vision blurred. Her body in alert, as if the air had grown thin. She tried to get up, but her legs trembled. Her chest ached. The edges of her vision darkened. It felt like everything was collapsing from the inside out, and she had no place to hold on. The next morning, with her face still marked from the tears of the night before, she searched for the contact of a therapist a friend had recommended months ago. She sent a simple message. "Hi, I think I need help. Do you have availability this week?" The reply came quickly. Friday, at 10 a.m. At the first session, Emily could barely speak. The therapist welcomed her with a calm voice and attentive eyes. There was silence, but not like the one at home. It was a silence that held space, that waited, that said, "You don't need to rush." When Emily finally found words, she said something that came from a very deep place. "I think I'm afraid of being loved." The therapist simply nodded, as if to say, "That's okay. We'll start here." The weeks that followed were a slow and deep dive. Emily kept up with her sessions. At first she spoke very little, but gradually she began to visit memories she didn't know still lived inside her. She spoke about her mother, how, throughout her childhood, she was cared for, fed, organized, but never told, "I love you." There was affection, yes, but it was always quiet, practical, almost hidden. Emily grew up learning that love was proven through silence. That too much affection was exposure. That needing someone was weakness. Then came the memory of her father, the first time he didn't come back, the promised weekend that turned into absence, weeks that turned into silence, and silence that became the rule. Emily spoke of this with downcast eyes, as if confessing guilt. The therapist listened without interrupting, occasionally asking, "Do you remember how you felt that day?" She remembered. The emptiness in her stomach, the fear of asking, the desire to disappear so as not to bother anyone. With each session, a new thread was pulled, and the more she pulled, the more she unraveled inside. Emily started avoiding her friends, made excuses not to go out, not to reply, not to be present. She barely slept, woke up startled, pillow damp, heart racing for no clear reason. She stopped listening to music, avoided films, anything that made her felt too dangerous. And the deeper she dove into her story, the further away Michael seemed, not out of resentment. It was as if he belonged to a life she no longer knew how to inhabit. His number was still saved, the messages still there, but she didn't read them, didn't reply. Not because she didn't feel, but because feeling, in that moment, hurt too much. Could Emily ever look at love again without turning away? Trust in her own ability to stay? Or would she let Michael slip away, like everything that once tried to truly love her? Let's find out. But first, if this story is making sense to you, if it resonated with you in any way, subscribe to the channel so we can keep telling stories like this. And before we continue, leave your like. Thank you for your support. It was on a rainy morning that something inside her finally gave way. Emily had been 3 weeks without leaving the house. Clothes piled up on the chair, the windows stayed shut, and the sounds of the street felt distant, like the world outside no longer wanted her. The therapist had suggested she write a letter to herself, a letter from the girl she once was to the woman she was trying to become. It seemed simple, but Emily put it off for days. That morning, however, she felt there was nowhere left to hide. She sat on the living room floor, notebook on her lap, a pen that had failed her before. And after long minutes of silence, she began to write. The words came slowly, trembling, broken by sighs. "I am not hard to love," she wrote. "I just had to learn not to expect anything." When she finished, Emily cried. Not the restrained crying of previous days, but deep, long, unfiltered tears. Tears that crossed all the silences. Tears from a quiet childhood, unopened arms, unmet waits. The following week, for the first time, she arrived at her session wanting to talk. Not rushed, not to fill time, but like someone who knows something must be said, or else it would explode inside. She shared an old memory. The day, at 7 years old, she waited for her father at the school gate. He had promised to pick her up. He didn't show. She remembered the heavy backpack, the other kids leaving one by one. The sky darkening, the sound of her own empty stomach, and the janitor turning on the patio lights as if saying, "It's over." She remembered the feeling of being left behind, of being forgotten. The therapist held that silence with her, and after a while asked, "And what did you do that day?" Emily answered slowly, "I waited a bit longer. Then I started walking home on my own, and I never asked anyone to come pick me up again." She took a deep breath, her eyes full, and said, as if finally understanding, "Maybe that's why I run when someone says they love me. Because for me, love has always come right before abandonment." That afternoon, leaving the session, Emily didn't go straight home. She wandered through the damp streets, went into a bakery, ordered a coffee, sat alone, and for the first time in a long while, felt whole in her own company. The next week, she found herself thinking of Michael with new softness. Not guilt, not desperate longing. Just a desire to look at it all with more truth. For the first time, his name didn't stir panic, just a kind, quiet space. So without overthinking, she wrote a short message. "Hi. I know I disappeared. I'm slowly finding my way back. I just wanted to thank you for everything. If you ever want to talk, I'd love to see you." She didn't expect a quick reply. Didn't expect one at all, really. It was just a gesture of truth. But that very night he answered, "When and where?" They met at a small cafe, near a square with tall trees and dark wooden benches. Michael arrived first. She recognized the dark coat from afar. He stood up slowly, with that same small smile, the one from their first date when she showed up late. Emily sat. Her heart beat firmly, but it didn't flee. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't hide them. This time, she stayed. She talked about the sessions, about the letter she wrote to herself, about the 7-year-old girl in the school gate, about her mother's silences, and about how, in silence, she too had learned to leave before being left. Michael listened the way he always did, in silence, present, with attentive eyes and no judgment. When she finished, he didn't ask for anything. He just smiled and said, "I like it when you come, even after some time." Emily smiled back, for the first time, without guilt, without fear, without running inside. It wasn't a promise. It was just a beginning again, and in that moment, it was everything she needed to be. The days that followed weren't euphoric. They were slow, gentle, imperfect. Emily kept going to therapy every week. Some sessions were intense, others quiet. Sometimes she cried just hearing her own voice say, "I deserve to stay." Other times she simply took a deep breath, as if relearning how to live in her own body. With Michael, there were no grand gestures, but there was presence. A coffee left at her door, a message at noon, a silent walk, hands softly brushing, as if to say, "I'm here, for however long it takes." They didn't speak of the future. They simply were, and that was enough. Emily started sleeping better, listened to music again, cooked something simple on a Sunday and caught herself smiling, alone, tasting the sauce. There were still hard days, still doubts, but now she didn't run from them. She acknowledged them, sat beside them, and said, "I know, but I'm not leaving." Little by little, she began to see herself through the eyes she always wished someone else had for her. And maybe that was the most radical act of love she had ever lived, because in the end, it wasn't about forgetting the absences. It was about choosing, every single day, not to be one more of them.